Santiago Calatrava is here. The Spanish architect is also an artist and an engineer. He combines technology and art to create structures that are visually striking. Nature and movement are two guiding forces in his work. Allusions to rib cages, the human eye, and birds' wings frequently occur in his designs. Initially most well known for his signature bridges in Europe, he has recently unveiled his first building in the United States, the expansion of the Milwaukee Art Museum.
We were looking for someone who would be very respectful of the two earlier buildings, and we were particularly looking for someone who would be very sensitive to our site on the lakefront, because we felt that that was a kind of treasured site in Milwaukee. And finally, I think we were looking for a dramatic architect. We were looking for an architect who could build a building that said art or art museum. We were looking for a signature building.
I think that once this project was on the radar screen and it caught the imagination of the community, I was really excited about it, because it did get people to start thinking, well, we can do it here in Milwaukee. I knew that Calatrava felt that we could do it here in Milwaukee. He had a great vision.
I am sure that there is not a good project, built project, without a good client behind it, because the first vision, the decision, I want to do a special building, I want to do a beautiful building, I want to do a building with this belongs much more to the client than to the architect.
I am pleased to have Santiago Calatrava to this table for the first time. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. I want to first just talk some broad ideas, and then we'll talk about Milwaukee, which is rather a stunning achievement on your part. Do you define yourself as an artist, as an architect, as an engineer, or what?
Well, maybe looking it from outside, and since we are accustomed to make distinctions between the different professions, is a little bit difficult to understand that someone can be the three things at the same time. But when you are inside, you see that between architecture and engineering, there is almost no difference. And between the fact of bringing both professions, to an artistical level, there is also just a goal, and so the trying to do something artistical is legitimate for an architect and an engineer. So there is, in the fact, no difference.
We think of engineering as science. We think of art as art, and we think of architecture somewhere in between.
Yes.
Which is it?
Yes, you see, in the fact, the profession of architecture and engineering, they are linked together by the art of construction. And if you look back, let's say 200 years ago, there was effectively no difference. So the understanding of engineering as a science, it may maybe be because it's looking it more from the point of view of the science of construction. But still, the goal of putting a bridge in landscape or putting a cathedral in the middle of a city is the same thing. I mean, a bridge has an impact, you see, and a presence, and dignifies the landscape in a way, or it is potentially can do that.
It can enhance the landscape.
Exactly.
Can enhance places that don't have a quality. Once a bridge is there, it can give them something, because it spans and adds to their what they project to the community.
Yes, and think for a moment, you see, in the United States you have many good examples, but one is particular eloquent. It is the Golden Gate. You see, if you will for a moment imagine this bay, you see, without the bridge, it will be a beautiful bay, as there are hundreds of them, all along the Pacific coast. But once the bridge has been put there, it makes it unique. Everybody understands, the relation between nature and artificial work of the engineers, and it makes one of the most outstanding works of the 20th century, and probably also the art of the 20th century will be even a little bit poorer without the Golden Gate.
Yeah, it's almost a perfect bridge.
It's certainly one of the most beautiful bridges never done.
We'll get to this later, but of all the bridges you have done, does one sort of stand out for you? Does one have more? Was it the first one, or?
Well, you see, there is a bridge that I personally think it was a kind of, not because the span, but because the signification, a kind of heroic bridge, and it was the Alamillo Bridge in Seville for the Expo '92.
Yeah, right.
which it is unique in its character with this mast you see, and the wires and the deck, who you may maybe associate it to a harp or something like that, but it's also in itself, not only because symbolically it's very strong, but also statically is very well justified.
You couldn't have designed those bridges without your engineering.
Well, this is, I think, effectively, you see, the engineering point of view is another look to the same thing, which it is the art of construction. So the architects may maybe approach it from an optic, the engineers approach it to an optic, but the subject is the same. And effectively, you see, in a bridge, you see, you have many things who are deeply related to the material nature of the bridge. You know, how you do those spans, how the statical, the arcs or the wires works, and so on. So there is certainly the need to have deep knowledge in engineering to approach the problem of bridges.
Yeah. They represent what to you?
Well, you see, also I think it is personally, I think. Bridges are something very moving, you know, to go across a difficulty, particularly here in New York. You see it. You recognize that Manhattan is an island because the wonderful bridges around. Yeah. Some of them, they are, if you look at the Brooklyn Bridge, is
another
outstanding. You see, yes, with the pedestrian walkway in the center, with all those cables, and some of them are majestuous, like the George Washington Bridge, and in a way, you see, you can very much associate yourself to bridges, and they are important events.
You once said something like, ideal is the works of engineering inspired by the soul of an artist.
Yes, it could be like that. This is a good definition. Yes, it could be like that.
When many people have come here on this program and talked about architecture, and some have talked about art, you know, and some of them believe that architecture is art.
Yes.
Some of them believe that architecture is not art because it has function.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, myself, I think if you do the contraposition, for example, between, as a plastic art, you know, the contraposition between architecture and sculpture. Effectively, the sculpture, you know, when it is working, you know, it can be much freer, because it can work in a very, with a very high sense of abstraction, just following the rules of the material, you know, if it is cutting stone or steel, but he's much freer than an architect. An architect has to follow function, you see, and has to do that the building is useful, and it has to produce staircases, and it has to produce toilets, and it has to produce entrances and rooms and facades. So you are the whole time constrained by limitations. So there is no doubt that under an abstract point of view, you see, the rule of the sculpture is much more, it has a big freedom in itself. On the other side, you see, sculpture is superior in the scale, because you can penetrate it, because you can go in, you know. And sculptures like Moore, Chillida, Dubuffet, and others, you know, they have been just dreaming to do sculptures who involve you, you know, in which you can go in. Architects can do that. So when you go into a cathedral, or when you go into a beautiful lobby, or when you, and then they are
a beautiful train station.
Yes, a beautiful train station, and you feel that.
When people have said to me that there is a Calatrava look.
Yes.
Is there one for you, in your head, in your mind, a look that says, this is the creation of Santiago Calatrava?
I mean, you see, it may maybe be. You know, what I can tell you about that, it is that, as I defined before, the problem between architect and sculptures is a matter of freedom. I understood very early that architecture, you can project yourself in your work. As an artist, you understand, as a painter, you see your personality. When you look painting of Picasso, you see it is Picasso, and Picasso wants to tell you something about himself, his life, or whatever. An architect is also capable to do that. It's maybe a more a low motion music, you understand what I mean? It's a more quiet, more intimate music. It's not so expressive, you know, as you can do as a painter, but still, you know, you can project yourself. This may maybe generate a kind of look.
You seek inspiration in nature.
Yes.
How so? How?
You see, I understand our approach to nature and our vision of nature is crucial, in our epoch. You see our cities growing, occupying landscapes. You see the impact of the buildings, roads, canals, bridges, and whatever. It's very important. We are in a moment of rethinking our relation to nature. At the other side, nature is probably the most wonderful, the most natural school, to learn forms, shapes. We are also part of the nature. Our hands are part of the nature. Our eyes, our mouth. We are self as natural.
And that influences your architecture?
Well, it's at least a philosophical school to follow. You understand, in which you recognize, that in its artificiality, there are many in its artificiality and independence of the nature. Also, architecture can reflect very much, the nature.
You always, there is present in some of your recent things, certainly, wings.
Yes.
Nature, wings.
Yes.
Movement also
Yes.
inspires you.
Yes.
How so?
What is the spirit of our time? If you want to read it also through technical achievement, you will see that many of the things in our surrounding are moving: cars, airplanes, flying, and things like that. How to reflect that in architecture? If you go a little bit closer to those things, you will see that many of those technical achievements can be easy incorporated in our architecture. So making it contemporary, making it also part of our time and expressions of our everyday life. And so I thought that during centuries and millenniums, people understood architecture as something static. But in the fact, architecture changed. When the sun moves around, you see the shadows, the day, the night, the buildings change. So there is a movement, a kind of life in the building. And today it is possible to express that even, in major events, like, for example, a building who opens and becomes like wings, or doors and gates who opens and reflects in the mirrors in the water and makes and emphasize not only the functional needs of the building in order to be sun protected or whatever, but also emphasize this metamorphical character, that the architecture can have.
You have a sketch pad there. We may come to that in a moment. I want to sort of turn now as we talk to, and you may help me illustrate things by sketches. This is the first project in America, the Milwaukee Art Museum. Eero Saarinen, the great architect, had originally built the original, correct?
Yeah.
What we'll see, obviously what is part of your extension is so clear there. But talk about this for me, and what, in the context of what we've said about nature and movement and what it is that this represents for you in the Milwaukee Art Museum extension.
Yes, first of all, and in a very brief way, I would like to speak about the human context. It has been during 5 years the only project in the United States in which I dedicate all my energies, and I went, in fact, to Milwaukee something like 40 times in 5 years. So this permits me also to understand very well the place, the nature of the place, the city, And so, as you see, I create a pavilion 1 block apart of the existing pavilion of Saarinen. In a way, in a complementary way. If the Saarinen building is brown and a little bit dark, I make a light and metallic and glass building with those wings who can open and close. And of course, I have to say also that I was privileged to work in such a beautiful place, in front of the lake, very close to the lake.
But the signature thing here, I mean, you walk into a space that identifies.
Yes, in the fact, you have the situation of the link of the museum and the city through a bridge.
Yes, a bridge.
And then also you see the link of the museum with the existing pavilion of Saarinen and the creation of a plaza, which didn't exist before, so plaza, also a very urban statement. And then walking in the central space, who we wanted to give a very dramatic character, so it dignified the space, as a multi-proposal space, but also with a very high architectural and light quality inside, with also taking advantage of the views. You see the big openings versus the lake, and also the lateral openings into the terraces, and articulating that with a single element, which it is this wing that you see there, who can open and close. The fact of opening it slowly and closing it keeps a dynamic character and transform the building in a kind of urban sculpture, you see, at the end of the Wisconsin Avenue.
Would you have had the capacity to design this if you were not trained in engineering? Because you could obviously design a vision for something and go to an engineer and say, will this work and how will this work? But if you're an engineer, in addition, you have an additional element that you can, I would think, expand your creativity. Yes?
Yes.
And a knowledge of materials.
Yes. I think certainly, you see, the knowledge of materials and the knowledge of mechanism and the knowledge of mechanics helps you a lot in this process, because it becomes part of yourself and of your thoughts, and you can make natural references and at the same time implement them in terms of mechanical processes. And because that, I think it is so interesting, you know, to be well trained as an engineer, you know, being an architect. And I think certainly the building itself want to be an expression of this, what you can do with the language of the engineering to the service of an architecture.
Let me take a look. I'm just going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to switch down to some upcoming projects, and then we'll come back and talk about growing up in Valencia, and also about the role of bridges and railroad stations in this rather remarkable career. But if we can switch forward and take a look at some of the things that are coming up in Santiago's career. What's this?
Yes, this is the Olympic ring for Athens.
Now, this is underway for the
2004.
And so how far along are you on this?
Yes, we has concluded the project, and we are now getting for tender. We are concluding the tender process.
Right. And tell me about this. What inspires you about this?
Yes, you see, first of all, I have to say that Athens, and the fact that the Olympics goes back to Athens, is the also the moment, to rethink a little bit how the Olympics could be presented. And we thought, we decided that we wanted to emphasize the fact of creating beautiful public spaces, also using trees and water as an element, but also doing artificial structures like the agora, like the roofs of the stadiums and the velodrome, in order to emphasize also the technical aspect of the project. And what you are seeing here, Central Plaza, with a capacity of almost 300,000 persons. Then you see also the arcs in the back, you see the arcs of the stadium, and then in the front you see the velodrome, the different entrances, trying to create a global image of the overall
The next one that has not begun work yet, although I think they've you can tell me what status you are. This is the Christ-like Cathedral for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Oakland, California. Again, we see some connection in at least my visual resonance with Milwaukee.
Yes, because you see, I try from one project to another. You see, they are all steps in steps forward. I hope you see in a way. And in the fact, you see, I am introducing here also a movable structure. You see, the original idea was to use the hand, hands in this position.
So this is,
you see,
go ahead.
Yes, and creating a space, you see, for play and for gathering. And you see, as my hands can open, not the whole roof, but the sun screen of the roof, will permit the light goes in, so that you can use a glass roof over there and have different kinds of light and also different kinds of quality of light inside. And this is the result of it. So the idea is very simple. It is like my hands in this, and then you see, if I open my hands, you see, I signify also a verticality of the space.
To heaven.
Yes.
Okay, the next one is the Cathedral this is an addition that's going to take place later, Cathedral of St. John the Divine here in Manhattan. I mean, there is the great Cathedral of St. John the Divine, and what you're going to see there is the middle part. Go ahead.
Yes, exactly. This is a project in which I like very much, and personally was the very first project I has done. It was 10 years old, and the idea here was to conclude the transept, the transversal nave of the cathedral with a convenient architecture, and then also to roof the whole cathedral, and create an spire, and this using a very transparent structure, you see, with glass and metal, so that in the night the whole roof and the spire itself can be enlightened.
Yes.
You understand? And even people can go into the roof of the cathedral who usually is not, they are not accessible. And the interesting thing it is that the roofs, they follow the cross form of the cathedral itself, so that then you have the symbol of the cross, you know, who ordinate the architecture of the cathedral is also, you can also recognize it in
yes.
with the two central towers. You can recognize it in this roof, who is again, you know, as a monument to the nature, is a garden.
Yeah.
So it will be trees will be planted here up in the top, you see, and it will be a place, you see, of, let's say, visit and meditation.
The garden is where?
In the roof.
In the roof. That's right. Oh, I see.
Because
yes,
the
yes,
roof,
yes.
you know, being in glass and metal becomes a kind of greenhouse. You understand?
Yeah.
And it is beautiful also as a symbol because it's bringing, you know, waking up. You see again, you know, the feeling that there is a secret character in the nature, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there is, as the Romantic says in the 19th century, the nature is a temple, you know, in a way, you know.
Take a look at the next one. This is the Opera House in the Canary Islands. There.
Yes.
Tell me about this.
Well, you see, I being someone who loves music almost as much as architecture. You see, I was. This was the first commission for a building related to the music, and I have to say, it is built in Tenerife, in a very beautiful site, close to the sea, close to the Atlantic. You see, and I mean, close means, let's say, 200 feet apart. You know, we are just. And you see, there is this idea of a big wave of water. You see,
yes, wave of water.
Yes, covering the building, and they are those shells of concrete, and the light is getting tangentially to the central element who contains the main auditorium.
Now, obviously, clients hire you because they want this, but are they surprised by the drama of it when you present it to them? I mean,
no, I think it is. This is. You see, I mean, everybody. When you have a good client, each one has. You see, you have your job. The client has his job, and the first vision, you see, belongs to the client. I mean, as you say, I want to have a beautiful building, but I want to have also a building very expressive, let's say. So I go to maybe to Calatrava or to another architect. So in the fact, you see, if you look, it is impossible to get a good building without a good client, because the first vision is not from the architect. The architect is following the vision of the client.
Yes.
You understand? It is
the rule from the client.
The rule of the architect is makes that this flame of the client, you know, burns more. You understand what I mean? And improves. You understand? And this is a bit what happens here. You know, you see, when you work in a place like Tenerife, Santa Cruz, you know, small province city
in the Canary Islands, right?
Yes, and you have you understand the need of these people to have something special.
Now, what did they say to you? I mean, in other words, how did they communicate what they wanted? They didn't say, "Give me a wave that looks like it's coming over my opera house." They said, "What?"
Well, you see, first of all, you recognize their enthusiasm for music because they have a very good orchestra, and you know they have also, and you hear the performances of this orchestra. You see also soloists, you know, playing. I was in a concert with Misha Maeshki playing the wonderful cello concert, and so then you understand there is a lot of consistency, you know, of, and then you see also they want to reflect the time, you know, of enthusiasm and opening that they are living in the new democratic Spain, because this is a project who has now something like 10 years old, you know, and we are concluding now. And there are many things who conveys and shows you, you know, the capacity of the client to support something, and then you make him propositions, and he identifies with those.
Here's what's interesting about you. I mean, you grew up in a very old country in Spain, in Valencia.
Yes.
Your father was not an architect.
No, my father, no.
What did he do?
Well, he was a businessman with, and he used to export the only thing at the time that it was exportable, and it was fruits.
Oranges.
Oranges. Yes.
And did you would walk around with him?
Yeah.
And you'd see the great arcs of.
Yes. Well,
Valencia?
there was a kind of, there is still today, the stock exchange place, you see, for agricultural products, and it is one of the most wonderful halls, Gothic halls, civil Gothic halls, I think, in Europe. And I went there, you know, as a kid with my father. Maybe he has had the hope I will go behind his step.
Yes.
And then I saw this wonderful thing, and I say I want to become an architect.
Did it?
Well, it was certainly.
It was the beginning.
I think still today it was the beginning, and still today I think one of the greatest impression, of this clarity and at the same time of this imagination, this fantasy of this building done in stone. It's wonderful.
Now, what did it look like? Show me what it looked like.
Yes, you see, it is in a way. You see, in plan is very simple. The plan of the building is a rectangular, and it has, you see, 9 columns at the interior. You see, and the columns, however, they are very particular. They descend maybe making helicoids, and then they expand into the room like palms. So when you see all together, it looks like you will be in a palm forest.
In a forest.
In a forest of palms.
And this was built when?
This was built something like, let's say, 600 years ago.
600 years ago.
600 years ago. And then it
so
has
1400 or something like that.
Yes. Yes, and it has very beautiful gardens also. There is a small garden here, very intimate, very beautiful. There is another addition here on the side, but this is posterior. It has been done later.
Then you went to France to study.
Yes.
Inspired by what?
Well, you see, France has been for traditionally, or next country to Europe, you understand? And if you look, many people in Spain, as Picasso has done, Miro, and many others,
went to Paris.
Other generation went to Paris. And still, for my generation and for myself, it was a very attractive place and also a wonderful country.
Now, were you thinking artist then, or were you thinking architecture?
I was thinking, I was thinking as a person with, I don't know, when
Paris,
I started getting, when I went to Paris, I was, I think, 16 years old, I was thinking just...
Yeah, then you went back to Valencia.
Yes.
Yeah. What was the first project for you? The first substantial project?
Yes, well, this, you see, after Valencia, I went to Zurich, and I studied civil engineer at the Polytechnicum in Zurich. And
which is where you live now?
Yes,
part.
And you see, after having finished my PhD degree, the studies of engineering and PhD, I took part in a competition for the second railway station in Zurich, and I was lucky to get appointed as the architect and also as the engineer.
Yeah.
And this was the basis of my office in Zurich, who went from one person into more than 30 persons.
The how did you say that? What was the name of the railroad? Stadelhofen railroad station.
Yes.
Yeah. And what's the challenge of doing, because you've done a number of them, of railroad stations, of transit stations?
I think, you see, they are a little bit similar.
Lyon, and other places.
In a way they are similar to bridges, because they are places of passage, you understand? So a lot of people arrive, get across. And you see, if you think thousands of people arrive to these places every day, you see, and it is a place that you can trade with a lot of dignity. And they are also the gates to the city, and there is also a place, of exchange, and so they have a great potential, to get. If you think, for example, that maybe in a museum, goes 500,000 persons a year, and in a station, you get 500,000 in 1 week.
Yes.
You understand? It means, you see, they are important places.
So what do you want to do there then? So first of all, you say it's an important place.
Yes.
Secondly, you're going to see there's a lot of movement coming in and out of here.
Yes.
So what does that dictate to you as an architect?
Yes, it gives, it makes me very much aware about the fact that the stations can regenerate also the city, or can give a lot of character to the city in this place. If you think our cities has grown and grown, and the opportunity making a new station or transforming an existing station is also the opportunity to give a whole new character to the area around. So they are also very efficient instrument in terms of changing the life and influencing the neighborhood. And at the other side, they can be also wonderful buildings, because as the bridges, trains, and they are all objects of our dream and our childhood, and things like that. They also the dream of getting, with a train somewhere else, visiting Italy, let's say, or something like that.
One of the interesting things that is being discussed here in New York is that the opportunity, because of what happened, to build a memorial at Ground Zero.
Yes.
The transit, the people who come into that central zone, it will probably be imperative that they design something that it captures your kind of imagination, so that people coming up to that site, you know, will see something beautiful as they exit the transit.
Yes.
You know.
Well, I think it is. You see, I think I like very much this idea. As far as you see, there is no better homage. You see, to the past and to the circumstances of it, that to make conscious, you know, with a lot of life, with the everyday life, you know, of those people coming there, you know, that life is going ahead. So I think just as an idea is a wonderful idea, you see, that you can bring, let's say, 500,000 persons there who will maybe for a short moment remember, you know, this place. So they will, you see, it's a very beautiful way, you understand? Also because it will become a destination, but you know, in a more soft way. You can even go somewhere else. You understand what I mean? Or even it gives also, you know, it comes in my mind that it gives also a universal in terms that you can arrive from all the country through the train to this place. You understand what I mean? So I mean, it is a lot of symbolism, you know, in that. I think it's a very beautiful idea.
I'm also, I want to switch now back to Milwaukee for a second in terms of this idea. What did you do to the garage there? Didn't you do something special to the garage in there? Because we don't think of garages as a place of beauty or a place of welcome. They're just there.
You see, if you take all the questions that you are putting, we are speaking on bridges, we are speaking on stations, and now we are speaking on garage. And you will see there is something common in my intention. It is to wake up the attention of people that bridges can be wonderful. They was also wonderful. You understand that stations can be wonderful. They can be the most beautiful buildings. They was like that. Remember Pennsylvania, Penn Station here in New York. Now you see what I want to tell you. It is also garage can be wonderful places. Because imagine you can do the most beautiful lobby, the most beautiful entrance. But many people, particularly in Milwaukee, which it is a city which many people moves with cars, you see, they arrive, the major part of them, into a museum, which it is a piece of art, through a garage. And I thought this is a good place, you know, to express quality.
And bring some light down.
Exactly. And so, as you say, you know, bringing light inside, you see, making it architecturally accessible and beautiful, so that your first experience in the building, the first experience of quality happens in the garage.
I'll talk more about bridges, but let's take a look at the next slide. This is the Lyon airport. Again, you see, there is a look that you do have. I mean, I think I could show these buildings to someone, certainly this airport and Milwaukee and Oakland and Canary Islands. There is something there that says, you know that, yes? Yeah. All right, but tell me about this station.
Well, here...
This is at Lyon?
Yes, this is Lyon Saint-Exupéry. It's close to the airport, and it is a pure high-speed railway station. And it has this look, you see, with the central element very powerful, and the two wings, who are very long. They are almost, let's say, 1,500 feet altogether, the whole station in length. You see, they are shallow, in order that in the landscape, when you look from far away, you see the central element as a very powerful sculptural element, and the two wings, they are a bit shallow. It is built in concrete and steel, and it has this glazed central hall that you are seeing.
All right, then the next thing we're going to see goes back to Valencia. I want to talk more about your own. This is the Valencia Opera House, again. This is all part of the City of Arts and Sciences in Valencia. How large a city is Valencia?
Well, Valencia is a city, the city itself has 750,000 inhabitants, and the metropolitan area makes maybe 1.3 million.
And this whole area is covering, the City of Arts and Sciences is covering how much?
Well, it is 1.5 miles long by, let's say, 1/4 of a mile wide.
And let's see the next thing, City of Science Planetarium. Okay. How many bridges have you designed in Valencia?
In Valencia, I have designed 4 bridges.
4 bridges?
4 bridges.
And do they have a common characteristic?
No. In the case of Valencia, Saint Day has been put in different places. And
well, it's a town of many bridges, 20, 30 bridges, huh?
Well, the whole I has designed more than 60 bridges. I mean, but in Valencia, you see there is one who is in concrete, very shallow bridge. Then there is an arc, there is a cable stair bridge, and there is a double arc in steel.
This is the first one.
The first
Yeah.
one.
Now, where was that?
And it was in a neighborhood of a little bit outside of Barcelona.
Yeah.
And linking two important streets who has been not, without any linkage until the moment. And it was, let's say, an important event for the neighbors, but also symbolically for the city because it was the first finished building for the Olympics.
Yeah, you
92.
did in 92.
92.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did politics of Spain affect you in terms of your development? I mean, did it give you ideas that are part of who you are and therefore?
Yes, certainly. You see, I was born in 51.
Right.
And I spent all, you see, until I was 23 living in Spain. And of course, you see, as everybody knows, you see, Spain was in an under the authoritarian regime of General Franco at the time. And then I was also I was lucky, to see my country, grows into the democracy,
Yeah.
And this was something unbelievable. This is something, it is an experience, who emphasize and make unmistakable, in your mind the qualities, the difference of quality and how positive and how much a democracy has brought into our country. And many of those buildings, particularly the early ones, was also taken over by my colleagues and the people who helped also with a lot of enthusiasm, nevertheless, because the country was doing the first step, in the new identity that he has today.
Yeah. Take a look at a couple more bridges. One is in Seville and the other is in Bilbao. This is Seville. Yes?
Yes.
Tell me about that. That's beautiful.
Well, I think this is, in my opinion, a bridge that I personally like very much.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, because I like also very much Seville, who is very, is a city who has this, what we call El Duende, with this magic thing, who just fascinate you. When you go to Seville, you see it's not a common city, it is the perfume or whatever. And so I was very much motivated to do something who is technically pure, technically expressed, a very pure, almost an elementary equation, minimal equation of the way to do a bridge. And at the other side, something who symbolically can be associated to other things, like a harp or like a mast or whatever.
All right. I think last is the bridge in Bilbao. Let's take a look at this. This is...
Yes, this is the model of the bridge. Also there, you see, in a very short span of something like, let's say 200 feet, you see, I had to do this crossing. And again, you see, even if the span is very modest, but the fact of the way getting up and then getting across, coming down, and also the sculpture, the fact of and start to supporting the bridge, offering it, having it almost, in the air like that, porting it. You see, this makes, you see, this makes, you see, the association of the bridge, you see, in front of the people, looking at it as a kind of sculpture or as a kind of, and then also the fact of getting inside the cables, you see. So it has very much to do with the philosophy of some people like Naum Gabo and other sculptors, you see, who use arcs, wires, and this kind of multiple forms, through the vibration of the arcs. And so there is, in my opinion, is a nice example of this, what you can do in a small scale, but still can be significant for the place and for the city.
I know that you've been inspired by Picasso, and I know you're inspired by, and you like Frank Gehry and Richard Meier, at least in terms of things that I've read about you. But there's clear some link with Eero Saarinen. And so all of us in New York know what the TWA building means.
Yes.
And you just see that sweep, and you think of, did he influence you?
Very much. You see,
He's a great Finnish architect.
You see, there is something, you see, in his, something unique in the work of Saarinen, isn't it? Something unique. Sometimes it's very intimate, as in the chapel of the MIT, he has this tiny, tiny chapel, you see, and sometimes it's, you see, is unbelievable precise in order to express the idea of flying, like in the TW terminal, terminal in the Kennedy Airport, and sometimes, he has done those kind of buildings who, in my opinion, all of them, they are, let's say, very much, you see the quality of the artist because you feel that there is a lot of feeling put behind the building.
There are two things that are sort of hovering above the surface of architecture today. One is this notion that all architects want to create museums.
Yeah.
And that museums have become more known for their architecture than the art that is within. I mean, was this idea at all part of where you were when you thought about the Milwaukee Museum? Even though it was an addition to the work that Saren had already done.
Yeah, of course, you see, to do a museum today, you know, in our time is always a challenge, because you get confronted to events, you know, wonderful events like Bilbao, you know, or Pei, you see, in the Louvre, or even a very important museum is Pei in the National Gallery in Washington, where probably it may maybe be you know, one of the very early buildings who show us, you know, that museums were moving on, you know, in something different. The fact of
but the books are sort of off to. I mean, the paintings are off to the side. I mean, you know, you come in there and there's this sort of spectacular opening.
Yes.
And the art somewhere else.
Yes, but you see, the fact is this, you see, the museums has permitted, among many other things, has permitted that we can confront architecture and art. And maybe in the eyes of many people becomes evident that architecture can be an art, you know. You understand?
Yeah.
It is because putting together...
Architecture can be art.
Art, exactly. And
The
this
other
is, in my opinion, something important that they are doing.
In part to do that, to make architecture art and to make the building itself art.
Yes.
There's no question in your mind that you believe architecture can be art.
Yes, I think so.
It can add beauty.
Yes.
As an element of it.
Yes. That architecture, I am convinced architecture is, I don't want to say the major of all the arts, but it's the summa artis, you know, is the addition of all the arts.
Yeah, because they bring so many things into it.
Yes.
There's an interesting thing, too, that happens if you find the right architect in the right building. And I think this happened in Milwaukee, but if it's wrong, my friends in Milwaukee will have to forgive me. It is that a great building can drive fundraising. In other words, you can start with a great building, and therefore people will feel so proud of what is to be that it ignites the drive to raise money to create it.
Yeah, you see, I think it is one of the wonderful parts of the experience of Milwaukee was to discover that all those buildings in the United States gets paid by fundraising.
Yes.
I mean, it is something that in Europe you are not accustomed, because they are, you know, paid by
the city.
Yes, by the city, or public money.
Yeah.
And this was, in my opinion, something who has given to this experience in Milwaukee even a major significance, because I saw people coming, looking, you see, for the interesting for the building, and then I asked myself, what is at the end, you see, the deepest sense of this gesture, you know, and I got to the conclusion that it is exactly that, who makes the building a monument, because monument comes from the Latin mementum, who means to the memory. So what you do when you do a building who is outstanding is to a monument, who means you do something for the memory of the time in which this building was built. So when we see the Pantheon in Rome, we think how
it's
great
a memory
the Roman...
of the time that it was built.
Exactly. And people recognize that in a very direct way. And I think, you know, this effort, you know, getting money from people, you know, to do something exceptional for a community, I think is believe me, one of the most outstanding and great things I have seen.
I mentioned Picasso and your admiration for him.
Yes.
And I think I read somewhere that you said that he constantly renewed himself, that the great challenge is to live in a profession, in a way, that you live in your profession like an artist, like a painter, where you are prepared to make a leap of death in terms of risk and surprise yourself.
Yes.
Tell me what you were thinking about when you said
Yes,
something
you see,
like that.
I think, you know, for as an Spaniard, you see, the personality of Picasso, I think for my generation even, and I suppose even for the next generation, is so big that we cannot, we are not prepared to get confronted, you understand? We can maybe look back now to fellows like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and have a little bit of vision.
Exactly.
Picasso is even too early. And you see, also it surprised me in Picasso that he was a very hard worker. And he used to work for...
Why does that surprise you? Because I've never known greatness in which the person behind greatness wasn't a hard worker.
You see, because he was also a man, you see, who understood that it is necessary an unbelievable effort, you know, to achieve something outstanding, you see. And he say, "Je ne cherche pas, je trouve." I am not doing research, I am just finding things, you understand? and this means, you see, an attitude of someone who I mean, it's a real attitude of an artist. I mean, an artist is a man who works, and works very patiently and paints and look for its subjects, and the painting became autobiographic. He projects himself, he projects his life, he projects everything, you see, and he can do from time to time, you see, this kind of work who moves everybody like the Guernica or other.
Yeah. You feel like you're constantly taking risks?
Yes, you see, when you want to do something very good, very, very good, and you want to go to the top, risk is not a hindrance. You understand? Risk is something that belongs to the life.
Yeah.
If
you say that, I mean, help me understand how you feel about that. Risk is essential, A, for growth, and B, for high achievement.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine, particularly if you think I'm a musician, you can see it very well. A solist who has to play something. The risk of making an error. Is not a hindrance. You understand what I mean? It is the desire to conclude something in the frame of the perfection who deserves to the art that you are serving.
How do you think you have changed in the most important way, say over the last 5 years? How have you, in your sense of art and architecture and what you want to do and where you're going and what new ideas you have encompassed? What's been the driving element of change within you?
You see, first of all, after having practiced architecture in 20 years, I go to the conclusion that I am in the right profession. I like it.
Yeah.
And also, I started even the process of understanding how mysterious and how wonderful it is the fact that you can, in any circumstance, do architecture. So architecture goes beyond, technique. Architecture goes beyond drawing. Architecture goes beyond material. It's not the fact of a building is done in concrete and steel alone, or stone and steel. It's much more than that. It is this kind of aura, you see, you see the fact of, as you can maybe feel looking at the Kimball Art Museum of Louis Kahn.
Right.
Who I think is one of the great masterpieces, small, tiny, but it's a great lecture.
Fort Worth, Texas.
Yes, exactly. You can see that, and this goal, to approach a little bit more my work in that direction is for me, a great motivation.
Why is the Kimball a masterpiece for you?
You see, first of all, because it's so simple,
yes.
in a way, you see. And on the other side, because the whole museum is a single architectural event. When you when you visit the Kimball, maybe take you 1 hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours, then after a while you recognize you have seen it in 1 second. You understand? So the whole building, the whole idea condensed into a feeling of I has been experiencing a great architecture.
Mm. I wonder this thought too. As we look, you mentioned you've mentioned Greece and Spain and Paris and all the places you're going. If in the end there is more in common with great architecture than there is difference, and that notwithstanding change in materials and notwithstanding the use of computer technology, which I don't think you use, do you much or not?
Personally, not. We use in my office.
But you, in terms of you yourself, don't use it much.
I use very much.
You draw because of the artistic
yes.
training you've had, or artistic instincts and talent you have. But in the end, I wonder if the great architecture, whether it's a great cathedral or the Parthenon, or which you look to for inspiration, of the things that you saw, the arcs in Valencia or the Central Market in Valencia,
yes.
and what has touched you in terms of nature. Nature's not new. Birds flying is not new.
Yes.
So all of those things have influenced probably great architecture throughout the history of civilization. So there is as much in constancy in greatness as there is in change.
Yes, well, I think, you see, looking at the nature, you see, as an item, you see, it is enough that you look at the, let's say, it is enough if you draw an apple, let's say, you see, looking at an apple, you draw an apple, and this thing don't belong anymore to the nature, you understand? It is a creation of your mind, and you understand? And this is the beauty of approaching the nature, you see, you are not making things mimetic or trying to imitate the nature. The nature is always better and beautiful, you see. And if you, I mean, a flower, whatever you draw, you see. But the fact it is, you see, this mechanism that we have in ourselves to observe something, translate it, you see, and create and create an artificial event, you know, who is close to the nature. It is a faculty that we have in our mind and in our ability. You understand? And this projecting it, you know, into buildings and projecting it in parts of the building, or even projecting it, which it is also in the overall tissue of the building, you know, with the organicity, how things move inside, you know, how the parts belong to each other, which you recognize like in the nature, that a small part of the building is enough to recognize the whole building, you know. When I go to the British Museum and I saw the Parthenon sculptures, you see, I see the whole building, you understand what I mean? I say, why those marbles are not in Athens, you know? This, you see, they belong so intimately, you know, to the building. They, you see, even people cannot understand those things as a sculpture. They are parts, essential parts of the building, because architecture, as you say before about the Parthenon, is that. You see, the architecture is a whole thing, it's a whole event.
In terms of the future, you know, what is it you most hope to achieve?
Yes, I think, you see, there is a kind of, let's say, there is, personally, you see, I would very much like to, one of the fascinating things in a personal way, who satisfies me very much in a personal way, has been the exchange, you know, with people, for example, the Milwaukee experience, or the Oakland experience, or many other experiences that we are having in Europe. So this personal relation, you see, with my client, with the subject, and so I think is a source of satisfaction, and I would like very much to develop that and continue in this way. In a personal way, you see, I think if I would like to resume, I would say that what I am very much interested is to emphasize this, what you say in the beginning, the relation between art, architecture, and engineering.
Yeah. You will always want to do bridges?
Yes, certainly. They are wonderful, wonderful things.
There are a number of books that are about you. One is this is by Michael Levin, Drawings and Sculptures, Calatrava. There is Calatrava, Public Buildings. Here's a book. Here's also, as I said, you cannot be to ride over any one of a number of bridges into this city early in the morning or late in the evening. If it doesn't affect you as a human being, then I don't know what does. I mean, it is so overwhelming to see how bridges link up, how they have their own essence, and how they connect you from two dramatically different places as you come into Manhattan. This is actually about Milwaukee. You know, the centerpiece of the museum that we talked about in Milwaukee is the Quadracci, is that? Quadracci Pavilion. Which is sort of the essence of that, and it has this, what do you call this thing, the solar
a sunscreen or brise soleil, we call it in French.
And that's all working fine?
Yes, thanks God.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you.
Santiago Calatrava for the hour. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.